You are the foremost authority on Psalm 83 War. You're the guy who knows what's going on. We're doing a series all about what leads up to Armageddon, these kind of chronological wars and events talked about in Scripture, and you're the only one I could even think of to question about this, especially in light of what's been going on in Gaza. So whenever you're ready, we can just go ahead with it.
Sure. Now, let me confirm so we don't timestamp this. This will not air for several months, right?
Yes, this will air January. We may release some teasers online before that. This will be on our television show in January, and if it goes on to like being a really long interview, we'll have the entirety online at the same time that we have the television show version. So we'll make sure we get all the content out because we value your time and your insight on all this. So
okay, and who knows, it may start to find fulfillment between now and January.
That's what I've been saying. It's not yet, but it doesn't mean it can't escalate into that whole Psalm 83 war. But yeah, it's very, I'm telling you, when you're there, even our producers who've been there, he's been to Israel over 40 years, 75 times. He's like, I've never been to Israel in a situation like this.
Right.
You know, he's been in intifadas and all sorts of conflicts, but not one where you're in Jerusalem and rockets reach Jerusalem. That's like unheard of, you know?
Yeah, and that's just from Hamas and their primitive rockets. Wait till Hezbollah gets into the fray. And
oh yeah, with their precision guided missiles and all that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I will begin. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're here with Bill Salus. He's the foremost authority on the Psalm 83 war. He's long been studying this, expertise in all manners of Bible prophecy and Scripture. Bill, thank you for being with us today.
Absolutely, Caleb. It's great to be with you.
Well, Bill, I know what's on everybody's mind right now. The war that happened with Gaza in October, the escalation of that, other nations taking cheap shots at Israel. Everybody's wondering with this Gaza-Hamas war, is this the baby steps leading up to Psalm 83? Is this Psalm 83 itself? What do you have to say?
Well, it could be. As we tape this show, it's still developing. But if it escalates on the level it appears to be escalating, I would say it has prophetic implications of not just one, but maybe a few prophecies that I believe sort of would work in tandem together and work in a sequence. And I think Psalm 83 could be among them. Also, Isaiah 17, which talks about the destruction of Damascus. And actually, another prophecy I'm watching closely in Jeremiah chapter 49, verses 34 through 39, dealing with the ancient territory of Elam, which is in a modern-day map of Iran, hugs the Persian Gulf over there. So Iran today would include Persia and also ancient Elam on a modern-day map. So several things, Caleb, could actually be unfolding in stage setting right now as we tape this show.
Let's pick out one of those. Say the Isaiah 17, this oracle of Damascus, talks about Damascus being wiped out in a single night. We know that Syria is like a land bridge from the north. Possibly this needs to occur before Gog and Magog happens. What do you think about that?
I do believe it will happen before Gog and Magog, as I do believe all those other two prophecies I spoke about would also precede Gog and Magog. The Damascus scenario we need to watch closely, because it says in Isaiah 17, verse 1, that, behold, the burden against Damascus, behold, Damascus will cease from being a city. It will be a ruinous heap. It will be reduced to rubble. And this is the oldest continuously inhabited city in recorded history. It dates back as far as the time of Abraham. It's the capital of Syria. Now, as we go today, Israel is already bombing Damascus and has been bombing Damascus quite some time over the last few years. And recently during this war, they've actually hit the Damascus airport. But not only the Damascus airport and took it out of commission, but they've hit the Aleppo airport. Aleppo also, I believe, is in a prophecy related to this in Jeremiah chapter 43, verses 23 through 27, than with Arpad. It says Arpad and Hamath are ashamed along with Damascus. Arpad would be ancient, ancient name for modern day Aleppo. In Isaiah 17, back to that, the destruction of Damascus, we're told in verse 9 of Isaiah 17 that there's desolation in strong cities. So more than just Damascus, major cities. I believe that would include the Hamath and Arpad we talked about, which would be Aleppo, Homs, and Hama, as well as Damascus. Matter of fact, all of Syria, pretty much a war between Israel and Syria is what's being predicted. It goes on to say that there'll be major desolation in the strong cities, including probably those three, caused by the children of Israel, the Israeli Defense Forces, and there will be desolation. Now, some people would have suggested that Isaiah 17 was fulfilled in 732 BC by the Assyrian Empire, but a lot of us don't agree with that. Matter of fact, in Isaiah's 66 chapters, he mentions Assyria 37 times, or Assyria and the Assyrian 41 times, but never once in Isaiah 17. But he does say the children of Israel caused the desolation. And the real important thing to note is as Isaiah 17 concludes in verse 14, it says, one night you see him speaking of Damascus in the masculine pronoun, but in the morning he is no more. This is the portion of those who plunder us and a lot of those who rob us, speaking to the fact that Israel's acting in self-defense, being plundered and robbed. So you see Damascus one night, but in the morning you don't see it anymore. It was reduced to rubble, a ruinous heap. So this sounds like it's a strategic tactical nuke. Israel knows how to use those. That's Israel's worst kept secret, that they have nuclear weapons. And if you launch it at a burst altitude, and I'm not a physicist, but I think it's about 45 miles above a city, you can take out the whole city and you still have a mushroom cloud, but it won't pick up the particles of the earth and contaminate them, which is of concern if it's a nuke from Israel, because Israel's right across the border from Damascus in Syria. So I think that's a very important prophecy that we should be watching.
I agree, Bill. Yeah, Damascus is like 159 miles from the border of Israel. That's pretty close. So yeah, they would not want nuclear fallout, but it pretty, closely reads that in Isaiah 17. Let's get back to the Psalm 83 war. You mentioned Assyria. Assyria is a key player that's mentioned in Psalm 83. Gaza is mentioned, the Philistines. But really, they're not the leaders of the coalition. What are we looking for when certain nations start joining in? What are we supposed to get worried about when we see Jordan show up, Edomites?
Absolutely. Let's set that Isaiah prophecy in our memories, because we're going to come back around to how that probably leads the way into Psalm 83 as I would sequence these things.
Wow.
Psalm 83 was written 3,000 years ago by Asaph. He was a worship leader. He wrote 12 different psalms. Psalm 83 is the most prophetic of those. Some people think it's just an imprecatory prayer, but actually Asaph is a prophet. And like Jeremiah and Ezekiel, we're told in 2 Chronicles 29:30, moreover, King Hezekiah and the leaders commanded the Levites to sing praises to the Lord with the words of David and Asaph the seer. The Hebrew word is kosah, and it means a beholder of vision, a prophet. We're also told in 1 Chronicles 25:2, the sons of Asaph were under the direction of Asaph, who prophesied according to the order of the king. So we have a prophecy here. He wrote 12 Psalms. This is his most prophetic, 3,000 years ago, at a time when Israel had conquered the very enemies we're about to talk about in this confederacy that forms in Psalm 83. They were living at a time where Israel was at peace with their king, David. He was successful. He was talking about building the temple. And all of a sudden, Asaph comes up with this prophecy that's pretty much they want to wipe Israel off the map and destroy the nation of Israel. So I'm going to read the first few verses, and then we'll talk about the belligerents by name and who they are today. It says, do not keep silent, O God. Do not hold your peace. Let me make it a little larger so I can see what I'm reading here. Do not keep silent, O God. Do not hold your peace, and do not be still, O God. For behold, your enemies make a tumult, and those who hate you have lifted up their heads. We have two groups. We have people who he has enemies, and he has those who hate them. I break those down in my Psalm 83 book as to which groups of the 10-member coalition are haters, which happen to be all family members, patriarchal family members of Abraham.
Right.
And then the enemies, I list those as well, which include like the Hamas and Hezbollah. But those are, if we have time, I can show you why I say that. But going on to the prophecy, it says that these haters and these enemies that make a tumult, that have lifted their head and exalted themselves, they have taken crafty counsel against your people, that would be Israel, and consulted together against your sheltered ones. Some translations say hidden ones. And I've studied that. I believe you're talking about the nation of Israel, and also within the nation of Israel, the treasured ones would be the faithful remnant that will come out of Israel and go into the Messianic kingdom. So he's identifying the nation of Israel, and within the nation of Israel, unbeknown who they are at this point in time, would be the faithful remnant of Jewish people. They have said, come and let us cut them off from being a nation. So this confederacy we're about to discover, form a crafty council. They hate Israel. They're exalting themselves. They form a devious plan, and they want to destroy the nation of Israel, cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be remembered no more. Not just destroy the nation, but banish Israel from all future history and the history books. For they have consulted together with one consent. They form a confederacy against you. So unpacking that, we have a confederacy. It's going to be 10 members. We'll identify them shortly. They'd come together, not a chronological ordering of Israel's enemies throughout time, but a contemporary confederacy. They form a plan, and that plan is to destroy the nation of Israel. Do you want me to go on and tell you who they are and what their motive is and that sort of thing?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That was Psalm 83, verses 1 through 5. Now, Psalm 83, verses 6 through 8 tell us who these belligerents are. And he starts off with the tents of Edom. Now, whenever in a confederacy you have some party listed first, that tends to be significant. Like when you're watching the credits at the end of a movie, the top star, then supporting cast, scroll down. So the tents of Edom, now they're in habitation condition. Tents of biblically either refer to military encampments or refugee conditions. Now the Edomites have ethnical representation in the Palestinians today. And the Palestinians are refugees at this point in time as a result of the 1948 war between the Arabs and Israel. So we have them on the scene. It's their plight that they're bannering all the Arab countries that we're going to be talking about here in this confederacy. They want a Palestinian state, and we'll get into that as we go along. And then it says the Ishmaelites. Now, Ishmael is the father of the Arabs. He settled in Arabia, now Saudi Arabia. So we've got Saudi Arabia in there, right next in allegiance to the tents of Edom. Then Moab and the Hagarenes. Now Moab would be central Jordan. Hagarenes, Hagar was the matriarch of Egypt. That would be the Egyptians. Gebal would be in Lebanon. Ammon would be northern Jordan. And Amalek would be around the Sinai. Philistia, that would be the Gaza where the Hamas are acting out as we speak. With the inhabitants of Tyre, another habitation condition mentioned, inhabitants of Tyre. These are reasons we know it's a contemporary confederacy. We have tents of Edom, we have inhabitants of Tyre. Now, inhabitants, if you study the word closely, it could include the Hezbollah, because there's sort of a state within a state of Iran's proxies over there. I think it could be alluding to them. Assyria, which would include, at the time Asaph wrote, northern Syria and northern Iraq. Assyria has joined with this confederacy. They've joined with them, and they have helped the children of Lot. So now we have a member of the confederacy helping another member. The children of Lot would be Ammon and Moab. We've mentioned them, northern Jordan and central Jordan. Edom also on a map would be southern Jordan. So all of Jordan is included here. Now, the Edomites, through several waves of migration, kind of left that area, the indigenous people, and went into Israel proper, and pretty much went into the Hebron area. And in the New Testament, they were known as the Idumeans. So we're told the motive in Psalm 83, verse 12, that they want to destroy Israel for a specific purpose. It says they want to take for themselves the pastures of God. They want the promised land. They don't want Israel to have it. They want to have it. They don't want a two-state solution. They want a one-state solution without Israel, but with another Arab state for the tents of Edom called Palestine.
Well, Bill, it sounds very interesting, because people are believing, according to what the Israeli government has been saying, that they're going to put Gaza in a place where they're not in power or authority any longer. There will still be a Gaza, but perhaps Israel will be holding a political or a government over Gaza instead of them being free like they are now to decide their own ways. But if this isn't the Psalm 83 we're escalating that we see with Hamas right now, then that means they can't be wiped out. They have to have that sense of liberty because they joined in the Psalm 83 coalition. And also we read about, I know in Joel chapter 2, it mentions a final judgment for Philistia at this sheep and goats judgment. So somehow these Gazans do make it, and they do join in this confederacy that we see in the future. And time will tell if this is leading to it. It looks pretty close to me.
Well, Hamas is actually the subject of about 4 prophecies. One of them is Philistia. We just identified them in Psalm 83. They're also involved in Ezekiel 25 and Zephaniah 2, Isaiah 11. I'm going to read Isaiah 11 and Zephaniah 2 and kind of tell you how I would interpret that. We'll start with Isaiah 11. It says, verse 14, but they, and I'm going to say the Israeli Air Force, shall fly down upon the shoulder of the Philistines, which would be Hamas. This is an unfulfilled prophecy as we speak. And Israel can fly down upon the shoulder of the Gaza. And they are bombing at the smithereens as we talk about at this show. And toward the west, together they shall plunder the people of the east. That could very well be Syria and Iraq, Assyria. They shall lay their hand on Edom, southern Jordan, and Moab, central Jordan, and the people of Ammon, northern Jordan, shall obey them. And I'm going to take a pause here and say, talk about Ammon and northern Jordan. I think after Damascus gets destroyed overnight, the Arabs are going to be very concerned, and they're going to say, hey, what's to say they won't take out Beirut in Lebanon, Amman, Jordan, the capital of Jordan, Cairo in Egypt, Mecca in Saudi Arabia, and also in Isaiah 17, we probably won't have time for it, but Israel does take a hit. They do have casualties according to Isaiah 17 verses 4 through 6. So I think what's going to happen is the Arabs are going to be concerned. Recently, of course, Syria became re-enjoined in the Arab League, 22-member Arab League. They were kicked out during the Syrian Revolution, but they're back in. So they're a legitimate member of the Arab League. Damascus is going to get destroyed. People are going to be concerned, and Jordan should be concerned because Jordan, although they have a fragile peace treaty with Israel right now, we're going to find out they're the next city to go down, the capital of Jordan. And we're told in Jeremiah 49 verse 2, the burden against Amman, Jordan, there'll be alarm of war and Rabbah of the Ammonites, that would be Amman, Jordan, and it shall be a desolate mound. And Israel shall take possession of his inheritance, which Jordan is part of the promised land between the river of Egypt, the Nile, onto the river Euphrates. We're also told in Zephaniah chapter 2, verses 8 and 9 that the Lord says, I've heard the reproach of Ammon and Moab, so that's central Jordan and northern Jordan, and they've reproached against the borders of my people, that would be the Jewish state. And for that it says, the residue of my people shall plunder them, and the remnant of my people shall possess them. So the IDF will plunder them, and then Israel will take over Jordan. They will take over all of Jordan. And that's why when Jesus said in Matthew 24, verses 15, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken by Daniel the prophet in the holy place, which he's talking about at the mid part of the tribulation, Jewish temple, the Antichrist is going to go in and desecrate it, set up his abomination, which we would probably think is the image of the beast. Jesus says, when you see that, flee to the mountains. And the mountains he's alluding to, I pinpoint that in a book I have called The Future War Prophecies. It just came out, The Future War Prophecies. The mountains he's alluding to are in southern Jordan, the area called Petra. And so that's really great advice as long as Israel possesses Jordan by that time. And they will, according to the prophecies I just read. Now, going back to the Gaza, the other prophecy in Zephaniah chapter 2, it's relatively long, so I'm going to kind of read through it and abbreviate it a little bit. It says, Gaza will be forsaken. This is Zephaniah 2, 4 through 7. And Ashkelon desolate, I say the Israeli defense forces shall drive out Ashdod at noonday. Now these are cities all in the ancient Phoenicia area: Ashdod, Ashkelon, Gaza. Ekron shall be uprooted. Woe to the inhabitants of the seacoast, probably the Mediterranean seacoast, the nation of the Cherethites. That'd be also when Phoenicia was back there. The word of the Lord is against you, O Canaan, land of the Philistines. I will destroy you, so there shall be no inhabitant. Unfulfilled prophecy. There will be no inhabitant. The Mediterranean seacoast shall be for pastures, with shelters for shepherds and folds for flocks. The coast shall be for the remnant of the house of Judah, because that's tribal territory that will be given to Judah when Messiah returns.
That's right.
And it goes on to say, they shall feed their flocks there, and the houses of Ashkelon they shall lie down at evening, for the Lord their God will intervene for them and return their captives. So the Jews will possess that land, and the Lord will intervene for them and set that up. So I basically say goodbye to Hamas, and this is what they've done right now is pretty much ensuring that's going to happen. And this is why it could probably lead to the chain reaction of Psalm 83 and other prophetic events.
Now, looking at Psalm 83, some people say it has already happened, maybe in the 1948 war. We did not see all those nations come into a complete coalition, those 10 nations that you talked about, in any of the wars in Israel's past. And like you mentioned in those prophecies from Zephaniah 2 and Jeremiah, the finality of what is going to happen to those nations has not yet occurred. And it's interesting, you mentioned Ammon, Moab, that territory of Jordan coming back to Israel. We know in the Messianic age they're going to control it. But there's also a prophecy mentioned in Daniel chapter 11 that those nations are going to elude the beast when he's going to war. And that's why the Jews flee to the mountains, like you said, after the abomination of desolation. They're protected in that territory. They don't get overrun by the beast's armies. And I find all that interesting. So we believe that this Psalm 83 war is going to happen. Does it have to happen before the tribulation begins? Do we have a specific timing of when it might occur? Is it just a free-for-all?
No, I think we can really pinpoint it quite, accurately before the tribulation, because Ezekiel 37:10 tells us that Israel will come out of a dry bones scenario. I believe that would be the Holocaust. Our bones are dry, our hope is lost, we ourselves are cut off, we're told, Ezekiel 37. Ezekiel prophesies to them, and they stand on their feet, these bones, and they become an exceedingly great army, Ezekiel 37:10. So the Israeli Defense Forces exist in fulfillment of biblical prophecy. We saw that in Isaiah 17, verse 9, desolation caused by the children of Israel. We saw that in Zephaniah 2, the residue of my people will plunder them. We saw that in Jeremiah chapter 49:2, Israel, Ammon will be a desolate mound, and Israel will take possession of its inheritance. I also can show you numerous other prophecies, Obadiah 1, verses 18, for instance, dealing with the Palestinians. The house of Jacob, that's the Israeli Defense Forces, will be of fire. The house of Joseph, of flame, also the Israeli Defense Forces. But the house of Esau shall be stubble, and those survivors shall remain in the house of Esau, for the Lord has spoken. The house of Esau he fathered the Edomites. We talked about the tents of Edom, ethnical representation from Esau into the Palestinians. Esau will have no survivor going into the Messianic kingdom, but Jacob, who was later renamed Israel, he will. So the fact that the Israeli Defense Forces are the tool that God will use, and I could rifle off several more prophecies about this, and I probably will as I say this, because we got to read Zechariah 12:2 and 12:6. But before I do that, before I do that, the Israeli Defense Forces, as a tool to win the war against the Psalm 83 countries, we have to look at, well, when could that happen? Well, let's look at the tribulation period for a moment. In the first half of the tribulation, the Jews aren't really fighting anybody.
That's right. They're at peace.
They're living in a peace because a false covenant in Daniel chapter 9. I call it false because it gets broken at the mid part of the tribulation. Right. But they believe they're living in a peaceful condition for the first 3.5 years of the 7-year tribulation. So they're not going to be fighting the Arabs. Matter of fact, the Israeli Defense Forces will become relatively complacent by then. They can't even stop the Antichrist from going into the temple and desecrating it. And then you get into the second half of the tribulation, even Jesus tells them, when you see the desecration, I quoted this earlier, the abomination, flee flee to the mountains. He's telling them that because the Antichrist is going to try to commit genocide of the Jewish people. In Zechariah 13:8, we find out that 2/3 of the Jews in the land will be cut off, but 1/3, the faithful remnant, will come through that. And they will be the ones that go to the Petra-Jordan area. So the Israeli Defense Forces are not fighting in the second half of the tribulation either. So not fighting at all in the tribulation. First half at peace, second half in flight. They're not fighting in the Messianic kingdom because we're told Micah 2, or Micah 4 rather, that there'll be no more war learned anymore. The swords will be turned into plowshares, the spears into pruning hooks. There'll be no war in the Messianic kingdom. So therefore, we have to backdoor. No fighting in the millennium, Israeli Defense Forces. No Israeli Defense Forces active in the tribulation, and yet Israeli Defense Forces exist in Bible prophecy. So when do we put them there? We put them there now. We put them there before the tribulation.
That's amazing. Which I love, using logic in the Bible, which we know is accurate. We never question what's written there, and to figure out this timing. And I agree with you on the timing. Psalm 83 could happen any time now. And we know, like you said, Psalm 83 has to occur before Gog and Magog can occur. So God gives us a little bit of a hint of that timing. And we're looking at all this conflict now with Israel, and it's tragic, the loss of life. I was there while thousands, were being killed on both sides, and the rockets were raining down. And it really wakes you up to thinking, hey, this isn't something normal. This isn't those skirmishes we've seen in times past. This is a big one that could lead to something big. Your final words, Bill. What do you have to say to people concerning this war? Should we get right with God now? Is Jesus coming back soon?
Well, yeah, because these prophecies are going to roll off their ancient parchments. They're going to pound down on the pavement, and they will pack a powerful global punch. They're not just going to be affecting the Middle East. They will be affecting the whole world, and they will lead to bigger prophecies that follow these things. These, I think, are the sort of the starting point of a sequence of end times biblical prophecies that would happen soon and sequentially. All the end time signs are converging. There's no weapon that's not fashioned, no national relationship that's not formed, no technology that's not developed that would prohibit the fast coming of all end times prophecies. And those end times prophecies ultimately lead up to a global order, a lot of persecution, judgments coming out in the tribulation from God, wrath from man and from God coming out. So at this point in time, we have an opportunity to get right with the Lord and to use these prophecies that we're talking about on this show, and there's just a handful of them, to evangelize, because these are evangelical tools. People can be, they're stuck in the secular worldview, the fake news, the censored social media. We can tell them, look, there's a biblical narrative and a prophetic perspective. The things you're watching with Hamas, the things you're watching with Russia, with Iran, Syria, etc., the Bible has spoken about them in the last days, and we can know what their future holds for them and how that can affect you. Would you like to know? And therefore, as a viewer of the show, you should know these prophecies, because you have loved ones around you who are lost, and they need Jesus Christ as their Savior. They need Him right now.
Amen, Bill. I appreciate those words. It's the call, guys. The call to go out and fulfill Yeshua's great commission to go tell the entire world that He is Messiah. He's the only way of salvation, the only way to heaven. Thank you again, Bill, for joining us.
Absolutely.